So self-centeredness is an equal opportunity employer, and it is not a small problem. Self-centeredness hurts others, the planet, and the self. It desacralizes instead of sacralizing. Big sentence. Last fall, I saw 3 piano movers uptown using ropes to haul a huge Steinway up to the 19th floor of an apartment building. The legs were off the piano. The piano was going in through a window, and it looked like a beautiful sight to me. The scene left me wanting to become a piano mover when I grow up. But it also had me asking around, had anybody else seen anything like this? And the stories were just endless. People wanted to talk about what they had seen, the time they were in an elevator with a piano and had to sit on the top of it, the time they watched one go up a fire escape, the time they were a little tipsy at dawn on their way home from watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade balloon blow-up festivities at 4 a.m. and staying flask warm. The individual telling the story wasn't bragging so much as confessing. Quote, "There it was crawling up the side of the building, its top against the wall. I promised to stop drinking that day." And then I realized that I wasn't as much drunk as watching a miracle. There are piano movers taking the piano up the side of the building. They were letting the piano climb the building, and so I just stood there and watched it, and sure enough, in. If I get a job as a piano mover, it will likely not be a physical one. I'll have to stick to my calling as a parish pastor who tries to talk people into miracles and music, using words rather than ropes. So the many people who do support the new Green Deal and evoke the New Deal that followed the 20th century's major depression probably wish they could find a piano mover or a miracle or some music. No one thought the first New Deal was going to work either, and it was, and it did. People of a certain age still brag about being part of that first New Deal. They were part of something. They said it couldn't be done. They said nobody could do it. And I helped make it happen. They became misfits, people who did things they didn't know how to do because they were part of a necessary miracle. You got to get the piano into the apartment. You got to get the carbon out of the air. You got to do something. There's something sacred about being a part of something else. And there's also something desacralizing about not being a part of anything else. So transitioning out of fossil fuels is going to take all the hope we have, plus some that we do not have. The Green New Deal, I'm sure you all know about it, but I'm going to just mention it, has at least 5 parts. Halt all new fossil fuel extraction, infrastructure, and subsidies, and transition power generation to 100% renewables by 2035 or sooner. 2, rapidly decarbonize agriculture and transportation sectors and expand access to public transportation. 3, ensure a fair and just transition led by impacted workers and communities, including low-income and communities of color, without relying on corporate schemes or market-based mechanisms. 4, uphold indigenous rights. Imagine that there are many different kinds of humans, and not all need or can have a hot shower every day. 5, pass a national jobs guarantee, creating good jobs with collective bargaining and family-sustaining wages. Piano moving, anyone? Which part of any of that would you like to sign up for? If the new Green Deal or piano moving is too much for you, and it is a lot, but it also takes a lot to get a piano to climb a building. If it's all just too much, go back with me to what Holly Bean said last Sunday about the theme of February 1st, growing old together. I was absolutely enchanted by what she said. She said we were going to call it growing in place, which is kind of an individual summation of it, and now we're going to call it growing and place. That move is everything. It's a big shift. It means that your personal experience, in this case, the personal experience of aging, is important, and that the place where you do it is more important. Self-centeredness is a problem. See, it's not just about you, anything. Aging, being a kid, being a teenager, having a broken leg, it's not just about you. It can feel that way. But self-centeredness even hurts you. Whenever you make something all about you, it is desacralizing. Whenever you add something to your experience of whatever it is, the environment, the place, another person, that is sacralizing. We're not bad as individuals, that's not the point. It's just that we're incomplete. We're kind of stranded in our own individuality. Our individual lives are actually magnificent. We're amazing. We're unbelievably interesting. And the earth and its communities are even more so. It's a stack of goodness. And when the stack just gets stuck at the bottom level in that individuality, things start to go wrong. We are people who desperately want to be a part of something. We want to be able to do something important. As Henry put it in his testimonial today, it was great for him to be a part of something larger than himself. When people get together to do something, they can do more than they think they can almost regularly. Most of the Psalms, the best literature, the best wisdom literature, talk about living on something large called the earth. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. The earth isn't yours. It's not yours. It's not mine. It's not theirs. It's not the people who were here before or even the people who might be lucky enough to come afterwards. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So in this context of worrying about the captivity of self-centeredness, I have begun to ponder the possibility of Earth without humans. I can't seem to get the idea out of my head. I know it's not a nice idea, and I don't tell children, but I've just begun to ponder it. I've even become to kind of enjoy the idea. We haven't always been here, and we don't always need to be here. So-called advanced people may just be too much for the earth, and I love the earth even more than I love people. People, like me, need too many showers. We need too much food. We need too many cars and airplanes. When we talk about the survival of the human, what are we really talking about? Aren't we talking about the survival of a certain kind of human? The ones who are colonists? The ones who got unlucky enough for a short time to eat a lot and drive a lot and have to worry about excessive numbers of calories? Barry Lopez ponders the submersion of indigenous cultures by Western colonialism. He says, "My sadness is that once you set aside the notion of primitive peoples and advanced peoples, you understand that civilizations develop in response to the places where people live, aging and place. That's how we develop, responsive adapting to our environments. Aboriginal people, some tribes, have lived in places for up to 60,000 years. So why don't we ask them, says Lopez, how'd you do that? How'd you make that work, given the climate and the difficulty of hunting and population growth? How'd you get comfortable here where, well, I couldn't stand this heat or this cold for 24 hours. I wouldn't make it. I'd need an electric heater. Would their solutions help us? I think so, says Lopez. But instead of asking them, we killed them. We need to begin to hope for the survival of the right kind of human. Indigenous people, under current systems of power, will be the first ones to go from climate change. What kind of human does that? Is that an advanced human or a desacralizing human? To maintain hyper-comfortable lifestyles, we have already given up a lot. Self-centeredness is the consequence of our dependence on all we think we need. We worry about having to live without it. Ask Ruth Reichel, whose new book, Save Me the Plums, I hope you've seen it. It's a wonderful title. Have you ever tried to find a good plum? Harder and harder and harder. They taste like plastic. We're also giving up bird song, and there's a beautiful new installation at the Arts Club of Chicago that records a massive data set of geotagged birdsong recorded by citizen scientists for what they call the Xenocanto Project. And it basically follows the dawn all the way around the planet and listens to the birds that are still singing in all those places. We're giving up birdsong for cars. What kind of people do that? Closer to home, right here in our neighborhood, people are thinking up really interesting resacralizing thoughts. Adrian Benepe, who we fought with over Washington Square Park and was former Parks Commissioner under Mayor Bloomberg, is now the executive director of an organization called the Trust for Public Land, right over on Broadway and West 3rd. And they have as one of their objectives to make NYU the greenest campus in the world. Now, no laughing. No laughing. Hear it out. Consider, the higher the building, the more densely populated it is, the greener it is. Density is more green than spread. Secondly, NYU not only generates its own power by its own power plant already, it sells some of the power it can't use. Benepe is advocating with NYU, and is obviously trying to organize us into this project, that we close University Place to cars. We close Washington Street to cars. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? And connect Union Square in a greenway to Washington Square Park. He is advocating, oh, I knew you'd like this. I knew it. Good. And the same thing around the L train, right? 14th Street, Greenway, planting trees all over the place. And his argument is that while NYU has the infrastructure already in place to be very, very green, if not the greatest, NYU always wants to be the greatest something, and that becomes a problem all by itself. But he wants to plant trees on the avenues and sidewalks, but that's a problem because it is, many of our sidewalks are hollow and there's no dirt under there. So they've got these new techniques for doing that they're talking about. They've already greened the playgrounds of a half a dozen schools around here. When you green a playground, you take the asphalt out and you put porous materials in, so that helps the rainwater, and the city is paying to do this. So that's a picture of a future right here in New York City. Quietly resacralizing our neighborhood and getting ready to do so with some more noise and some more oomph. Now that is in great contrast to what John Muir was talking about in 1867, one of the first Western environmentalists. He walked, kind of a crazy guy, interesting, walked from Louisville, Kentucky to Florida, a trip that inspired his first heretical thoughts about the meaning of being human. Quote, "The world, we are told, was made especially for man, a presumption not surrounded or supported by all the facts. Muir found out what people were doing in Florida with alligators, and he was appalled. They were eating them because the centrality of that kind of human thinks that everything is for our consumption. So Muir composed an ode to the alligator. Honorable representatives of the great saurian of an older creation, may you long enjoy your lilies and your rushes and be blessed now and then with a mouthful of terror-stricken man by way of a dainty lunch." Something like that is not impossible for self-centered people. A beautiful new book, The Writer's Map, an Atlas of Imaginary Lands, has as its theme, every story is a map of the world, and everyone draws themselves at the center of the world. Oddly, over the holidays, I read about Laura Spelman. Does anybody know who she is? John D. Rockefeller's wife. Daughter of a Congregationalist minister from Ohio, then married one of our great benefactors here in this room, and married into a great Northern Baptist family. Who knew? She supported many, many, many things, but she supported something called the Green Book, a map which helped African Americans travel throughout the South when it was too dangerous to go there. And it was a book that got published, and Laura Spelman, Mrs. Rockefeller, spread it around. It was an underground map. I like to think that that's what we're doing in New Sanctuary. I like to think that that's what we're going to be doing ecologically, environmentally, is giving maps that deposition a certain kind of human and make space for the fullness of the earth. Not that there's anything wrong with the human as we are, but we could be so much better piano movers. Amen.